Welcome, everyone. This is my free monthly group coaching call. So, thanks to you all for showing up today. We're going to talk about attachment styles. So, first, I want to say that differences in attachment styles, particularly between the preoccupied, anxious attachment style and the more avoidant attachment style, that polarity in relationships is the biggest cause of relationship misunderstanding and conflict. And I want to help clear some of that up today because we often, when we're part of those two styles, so I'll talk about the definition of those two styles, where they come from in terms of the family of origin dynamics. And then I want to have a lot of show of hands kinds of activities so that we can get a better understanding of the other attachment style and the behaviors that they exhibit that we often misunderstand. So first, I'll just define what we mean by attachment styles and do a little bit of helping you clarify if you belong to one of these more common insecure attachment styles, and then what each style has to teach and learn from one another. But first, you have to go through a phase where you scare each other with your behavior. If you're very intimate and you're very interdependent, the other person's behavior, sometimes you unwittingly scare your partner. Uh, and really, there's some deep misunderstandings about what's behind some of our behaviors when we're insecurely attached. So back in the 60s, there were a number of psychologists, um, Mary Ainsworth, John Bowlby, who studied childhood attachment and what children need in order to grow up healthy and secure. Meaning, when we say secure as adults, we mean that you're not looking out for danger. You kind of trust that if you ask for what you want, the world will be friendly toward that. I mean, they'll either give it to you or at least they won't shame you for asking for what you want. You're just like expecting kind of the best from people. You have basic trust. So this is what the secure child looks like, and it carries on into adulthood. So this is what the secure adult looks like. So I'll start there. So the secure child can be comforted. If they're upset, they can calm down easily and that sort of thing. Then go on about and play. If they have a misunderstanding with a little friend, they can make up and not like hold a grudge. It's just like being kind of trusting in relationships. You're not afraid you're going to be hurt. Or if you are hurt, you just go tell the person and they'll hug you. At least that's what you expect. And they'll apologize, that sort of thing. And that's kind of the culture, the I'll hug you. If I'm a parent, I'll hug you if you're distressed. I won't say stop crying. Don't be a baby. You're too needy. I won't be that kind of parent. So the culture, the family culture that breeds securely attached adults is friendly toward the child's needs. And when the child is upset, the child gets consistent co-regulation. Co-regulation is a very important term these days. And for childhood co-regulation, it means I'm upset and I can reliably go to an adult who accepts my feelings, calms me, holds me, so that a calm nervous system next to my little person, upset nervous system shows me that you can go from being upset to being calm rather quickly and easily. And during
Susan, I'd
childhood,
like to interrupt and maybe you would be
yeah.
willing to mute everybody because some of the people are
Oh,
not
that's a
muted.
that's a good idea. I didn't put participants up there. So I have to go down here, mute all. So now I'm going to be inviting sharing in a little while. So before you share, unmute yourself, or we'll remind you. It often happens. We don't remember until till we see ourselves. We see the mouth moving, but no sound. So thanks for that. And maybe while we're doing housekeeping things, is there someone who would be willing to be co-host who's going to be here for the whole hour? Maybe raise your hand. Okay, Adrian, great. Because last month I had an internet problem, so I need to just find Adrian here, and I'll make you co-host. Because last week or last month we had a problem, and so if I get knocked off, see, I don't see, oh, there's Adrian. Good, thanks. If I get knocked off, you all won't see a blank screen. You guys will just stay on and wait for me to get back on, or I'll email you, Adrian, and let you know what's going on, and you can take over. How's that? Thanks a lot. Okay, I'm not sure where I was there, but I think I was still talking about there's different family cultures. There's a family culture that breeds secure attachment, and that's the culture where the child can get reliably co-regulated. And I was saying that co-regulation basically means you can count on somebody to be there so that they teach their ability to hold you when you're upset. I don't mean hold you like, if you're screaming and fighting to get away, but they can appropriately hold space for you or give you hugs, that sort of thing, so that you learn that it's not that big of a deal to be upset. So that's what secure attachment means. I can be upset, but I'll get over it. So according to that childhood attachment research, 50% of people in the US population are thought to be securely attached. My experience says there's a lot. That's a very optimistic statistic. I only know a few people who I would consider securely attached, and I've been living a long time. Where are they? Anybody else have that feeling? You don't have to show your hands, maybe, but like really, who are these researchers? So, thanks for that. I want to take a look and see how many people are here now that because there's this page is full. Okay, so I guess there's two full pages of you all. So again, I'm very grateful for the response. So some of the statistics in terms of percentages take with a grain of salt. But let me now define the other two main attachment styles, and we're going to get into which one do you tend toward, that sort of thing. So there's also an attachment style, and this goes for children and adults, but we're going to talk mostly about adulthood, but I will mention the type of family culture that leads to these different attachment styles. So one of the main two insecure attachment styles, and insecure basically means you don't have full trust that the world is friendly toward your needs. So this mostly all has to do with what we call attachment needs, like the need to feel loved and cared for and valued and that you're good enough. And I'll do a little diagnosis for all of us. We'll do a little self-diagnosis also on this call about which needs of yours were well met and not so met. So now Carrie's raising her hand. So what is on your mind, Carrie? Unmute yourself. Oh, you're just putting up your hand for something else. Okay.
That was a mistake. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. So let me define. There's preoccupied and avoidant, or preoccupied anxious, it's sometimes called. And that's supposedly, according to the research, 20% of the population, but I think it's probably more like 40 or 50% as far as I can tell. And that attachment style wonders if you're loved, if your voice is valued, like there's no room for my needs. Those kind of reactive stories can come in when you're in an intimate adult relationship. Preoccupied is vigilant about when the other person's moving their attention away from you. So start to see if you feel like you're a little bit in this category, or maybe your partner is, or a former partner, that sort of thing. So this is only one cut of different personality styles, but this is the one we're going to talk about today because it really causes a lot of pain. Preoccupied is also likes to talk to get connection. Some people, they talk for connection, and then the other person, if you have an avoidant partner, the avoidant partner tends to get easily overwhelmed with a lot of words. And that's just a function of the way their nervous system has been wired during childhood. But if you're talking to get connection and your partner's zoning out because they're overwhelmed, so I'm starting to show you how misunderstandings happen. If your partner's seems checked out, you'll possibly interpret that as they don't care about me. They're not interested in me. When really they're just trying to protect their system from getting too overwhelmed. And we'll go into a little more about why that is in a bit too. So and that I'll say something about the avoidant, and then I'm going to do a show of hands thing so that we can begin to assess our own style here. So the avoidant style is more like, if my partner's good, I'm good. If they're not telling me something's wrong, well, I guess we're good. Uh, if my partner gets upset with me, I might try to tell them, I didn't, I didn't mean that. Here's why I said that. Uh, a lot of explanation when somebody's upset with you, rather than, oh, honey, I'm sorry. Here, what do you need? The avoidant wouldn't naturally go to the place of attending to the other person's needs. They would be more like trying to calm the other person down. Let's look at the whole picture here. So there's a lot of reasonableness and explanations and a little bit of like teaching sometimes that goes on with the avoidant personality. Uh, and what the avoidant personality style or attachment style might be looking for is not so much am I loved? That's not where their insecurity lies. It's am I good enough? My partner seems to be always criticizing me or complaining about something. And of course, the reason that is, I mean, we're talking about if this polarity occurs in your relationship, um, the preoccupied person is complaining because they want more contact. It's not because they think you're not good enough. They're not thinking that way. But I read that as, geez, they're not happy with me. Why do they even want to be with me? In fact, they might even say, in a fight, why would you want to be with me if you hate me so much? No, is any of that ringing a bell? In fact, maybe the first show of hands I want to get now that I've given you a little overview is how many people have ever been in a relationship or are now in a relationship? I won't ask you to distinguish between those two. Uh, that exhibits this polarity. Let's see a show of hands. Now, I sure have. And let's give ourselves this. And it's good to have the physical hand because the Zoom hand doesn't show up on the recordings. So I'm going to request, and it's great that so many of you have your screens on too, because there's going to be a lot. We're doing research here, action research.
I appreciate having a physical hand myself.
All right. We got the idea. this is a common experience for those of us who are working on personal and spiritual growth, which pretty much the people who come to my seminars are people like us. So I don't know about these other people that are, two secure people together. I'm going to say that that happens after you're 75. So, because my experience has been, because I've been a couples counselor since 1967. Uh, my my experience is that in the early part of our lives, we have learning relationships. No, a lot of stress, but as you get older and you really do this work, you really can have securely attached relationships. And we'll talk more about how to help each other heal, because that's going to be part of this little webinar too. There is good news, even among those kind of polarities. So we've seen that a lot of people have experienced this. Now I want to get a few, are you more like this or more like that? Show of hands kinds of things. So I have two questions. I mean, I have questions that kind of categorize us into two groups. How many people here, and I won't tell you which is which, but it'll be pretty obvious. And maybe I will at some point, say, well, this is more the preoccupied anxious, or this is the more avoidant. But how many people here often wonder or ask about your partner's feelings? This is assuming you're in an intimate relationship right now, because this is where that polarity shows up and creates havoc. So how many people often wonder about how are you feeling toward me? And we'll ask questions about feelings. Okay, show of hands again. Okay, there's a lot of us. And on the other hand, how many people are more like, if I don't hear complaints or if I don't hear about it, things must be okay. Or if my partner's good, I'm good. It's that kind of thing. So a lot less. All righty, but and some of you may know some other people on here, and you may even be here with a partner. I don't know. That would be courageous, and I hope there are some partners here. Okay, how many people identify with that thing I said before? You talk to connect, and you kind of know that you do that, and how many people often get overwhelmed by the other person's talk? Somebody's Jessica's shaking her head. Never. Can't get enough face-to-face talk. Okay. How many people, after you've had a fight or a misunderstanding, want to solve it right away? And the other one would be, you can wait a while. So I guess I have to give both sides. But you really want to get it over and solve and talk, even if you're both still upset. Yeah, it's sometimes it depends on who your partner is, and you can even change. I do want to say this. You can even kind of find yourself in different positions. Like I was in my 20s, I was definitely the preoccupied partner. And as I had more relationships, I realized some people were more preoccupied than me. And so I was the avoidant one. I was the withdrawer. So that can happen. But still, there's sort of a basic home base, I think, for most of us. Okay, so I was saying move on after, I mean, talk to connect, don't want to move on after a fight too quickly. And then how about the other side, which is you really much more comfortable waiting until you're really calm, until you've collected yourself before talking about it, if ever. Let's say it that way. So, very comfortable going to bed, let's say with an unresolved thing. You can handle unresolved things more. Your nervous system can handle that. Oh, I see. There's at least one couple here because they're sitting there giggling to each other. And I'm gonna watch you guys because so often one raises their hand, and very often the two people in a partnership, they won't both raise their hand. It'll be like, oh yeah, I knew you would raise your hand for that one. So I hope you guys are having that experience where you recognize each other in these little categories.
Susan,
Yeah,
can I just have a clarifying thing?
yeah,
Because
sure.
it's like there's more comfortable going to bed or cooling down before talking, connecting. It's like more comfortable as in like numbed out, as in like, yeah, I'm used to not talking about
That's
things.
right. That's right. We're going to get into that in a little
It's
bit.
not really comfortable. It's like
That's
I'm
right.
used to avoiding.
Exactly. Thank you,
Yeah,
Scott. And that's we will get into both
got
both
it. Okay, cool.
both
Yeah,
partners are triggered, but we
yeah,
have
yeah.
different ways of exhibiting our triggers. So that's where I'm headed here. Um, when you're not together, like maybe one of you went on a business trip or something like that for a couple of days, th- the which let's say I'm either going to say it's really hard for you or you can tolerate a few days. So how many people, it's really hard for you to be without your partner. You miss them quite a bit. You really prefer to be checking in one or two times a day when the partner's away. So that's the one side, and you can kind of tell where I'm going with the other side. But how many people feel that tendency? And how many people would feel I'm away and it's kind of good to be away? Now, maybe there's some both and here. Okay, so I'm not making that distinction real well, but I kind of like some alone time. I can be myself more, that sort of thing. So show of hands there. Uh-huh. Some people are doing the ambivalent dance. Hi, Arthur. All right. Well, here's one that I want to focus on. Um, so I think I want to get into it. Um, the one about makeup after a fight. I think I want to get more deeply into that. Um, but you're kind of beginning to see this the sort of opposite thing. And by the way, I want to go into a little bit later why opposites attract, because there's a growth motive here. Sometimes we go, oh, why did I pick this person who frustrates my needs so much? Uh, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. But opposites attract to force you to confront some of your shadow material, which again, I said I'll go into a little more later because first I want to get us talking with each other across the aisle, let's call it. So let's say the makeup after a fight, quickly versus I can leave it. And in fact, I really can't talk right now. I'm overwhelmed. So the preoccupied would want to talk right away. The other person would need some time to not be talking. Uh, and that's why the avoidant type is trying to calm the situation down, like I said before, because their own nervous system is so agitated. And so even the thing about being able to go to bed with some unfinished business, you just need a break from all of it for a while. So let's see that show of hands again, and then I'm going to interview each side a little bit here and ask for some actual comments from the room. So, how many people just kind of can't stand to have an unresolved argument? We need to talk, make up as quickly as possible. Okay, and how many people do get, let's go back to just the generic question, get kind of overwhelmed by all this input and somehow need to get away from it for a while and don't mind leaving something unresolved, possibly even for days or forever. Okay, so let me just see those. Alrighty. So the second group seems to be in a minority in this particular room today. Those of you who raised your hand the first time, the preoccupied anxious, what frustrates you? I'm going to ask you a few different questions, but first, what frustrates you about your partner? We're assuming now you're in a relationship, so think of something where you have been in this situation. Anybody willing to verbally share what frustrates you?
I'll share.
Yeah.
So the thing that frustrates me is him talking too much. And then when he's away out of town, he doesn't text me, he doesn't communicate with me at all. Those are the two biggest things that frustrate me.
Okay. And when there's a fight, what do you wish the other person would understand about you?
Well, we both tend to react very quickly and get very angry.
Mhm.
So I don't know that we're kind of the same that way. We get triggered
Mhm.
very easily about different things, of course, but
Oh.
I'm not sure what I want them to understand. I think they do understand where
Mhm.
that I'm anxious, and that I guess they don't understand how anxious I can get. How they don't
Mhm.
they don't have the compassion for the anxiety that I feel. Yeah,
Okay,
that's probably it.
I think
Yeah.
that's a lovely comment, I think. Uh, Anybody else want to say something you wish, because let's call it,
I have a
you're the
question.
preoccupied. Okay, go ahead,
Uh,
Jessica.
Susan, I have a question that it seems to me that actually it's both sides are anxious,
Oh, yeah, both
but
sides
they
are.
have different ways of
Yes,
responding. And one,
yes, yes.
I guess because I'm the aggressor, that I feel like the other one is in denial,
That's okay. Yeah,
as
you're right. Yeah,
so
both
I
sides
think
are
that's how
triggered.
we all tend to get
Yeah,
oppositional in our own personal stance.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Both sides are triggered. And as I said, I'll get into that once we sort of get an understanding. So for you, would you say again, Jessica, what you wish the other person would understand?
That I'm very anxious and I need some help to
Oh,
calm down by understanding more from
yeah,
the other
yeah,
person. From
yeah. If you could only give me a little reassurance or a little love or attention, I'd be fine. It's not like my needs are a bottomless pit. This is what I hear a lot from Priyak. He thinks I'm never satisfied. No, that's not true. I would be satisfied with so little, but I get even less. Anybody, anybody ever had that kind of a feeling? Just, uh-huh. Yeah. So we're trying to, kind of begin to get. So those of us who on the other side and go, oh man, what a needy person, I got to get away. Um, can you kind of feel there? I'm trying to promote some empathy here now. Can you kind of, just those few people who spoke, myself and Observer and Jessica, you know, we, that, our needs are not a bottomless pit. But like we've said now, to the avoidant is scared of not being enough. That's one of the core fears for the avoidant, not being enough, not being a good partner, not being able to deal. No, and we don't like having inputs coming to us. No one likes this, inputs coming to us that we have a hard time dealing with or coping with. Both sides. You know, if I'm preoccupied, I have a hard time dealing with him walking out of the room while I'm talking. Okay,
I
so
have
let's
a,
get,
can I
yeah, Michael,
interrupt
go
and ask a
ahead.
question? Sure, thank you. So I'm hearing this word avoidant,
Yeah,
and I can imagine being, well, even recently on the receiving end of way too much information or too
yeah,
many questions or too much coming
yeah,
at me,
yeah,
and noticing my nervous system just getting overwhelmed and wanting to close down and wanting to stop and breathe.
yeah,
Even that kind of withdrawal, shall we say, or
yeah,
provokes more anxiety in the other person
yeah,
because they make up stories that I'm abandoning them or leaving them or whatever, and I'm not. I'm just trying to caretake myself
right.
before connecting or before being able to honor their needs.
Yes.
So I'm hearing your word of avoidance, and to me, that is not avoiding anything. It's really reconnecting with myself so that
Right.
I can be present. So I'm struggling with that word
Well,
avoidance.
that's the common terminology in the
Okay.
attachment style literature.
Well,
That's
Susan, you've
hmm.
you've
But
mentioned
what
a
I'm trying to do is unpack these types that give,
Mhm.
give types labels to look at the human side underneath, which is kind of just the way you said it, Michael, is, I'm not really avoiding you. I need to resource myself before I can give you the type of attention I'd like to give you. And so that would be an answer, because the next question I was going to ask is, if you can live with the terminology that's out in the world, which is the avoidant terminology. Um, I guess that word's a little triggering for some people. Yeah. And and anxious and preoccupied is probably a little triggering for some of us too. So let's just let that be. That's okay. We get a little like uppity about, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's a label. But what Michael said, because what I was going to do is ask the avoidant people, uh, what would you like the other type to know about you? Michael just said it, and I won't repeat it because I already did repeat it. But it's like I'll be available after I've taken care of myself, that type of thing. And I think somebody else wanted to make a
I
comment.
I just wanted to say that a lot of times, um, as you mentioned several times, when you would say like, if ever, if ever, if ever. And I
Yeah,
think that's where the pattern gets tricky, is that the person actually does end up avoiding ever going back in. And
that can happen. Yeah.
that to me feels avoidant.
Yeah, so let's hear just because you're talking now, Elisheva, if you're willing to dialogue a little bit. So what would you like to get across to the avoidance that you've been in relationship with? Because what, what would you like to say to that person, that imaginary avoidant in your life?
I want you to be able to have all the time that you need to get, to regulate yourself.
Mhm.
And I want to be able to give you that space. And I want to be able to really rely on you and know and trust and feel secure that you are going to come back in.
Beautiful, thank you. And that is, I was, that's a perfect model, Elisheva, of what we need once we understand the dynamics of both sides, what we need to intend to learn how to do. Uh, in other words, I've coached many highly polarized couples in who exhibit this. And what they get into, first, we get into a vicious cycle. You know, the more you withdraw, the more I pursue, the more you pursue me, the more I need to move away. That's the common vicious cycle. And that whole idea has been around since the 50s at least in psychology. This is, maybe a lot of us is just learning about this now, but I remember reading in college or grad school about the classic, the way it was in this marriage counseling book, the way the vicious cycle was pictured was very sexist. She nags and he withdraws. There's a little picture. Okay, I hope you can have some humor about this because it still is a little bit biased in that direction. That and for various reasons, but I want to say one thing is we live in an avoidant culture. It's very achievement oriented. We may have grown up in a preoccupied family of origin because that's a culture too. But our larger culture is get the job done, be in control, don't waste too much time on emotions, haven't got time for the pain. And and this, and it's a male dominated culture, and it's and men have traditionally had the pressure of supporting the family. All of this has changed, but there is a tendency to divide according to uh, gender. But it's funny for me to remember back, it's like back in the dark ages in the 50s. People it only showed up that way. Men were very rarely preoccupied. I mean, I was alive then.
So, Susan, how do
Yeah.
you stop the cycle when you're the anxious person and they're the avoidant from, I mean, how do you stop the cycle of avoiding anxiety, blah, 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 that cycle?
Um, I'm trying to decide if I want to if I'm ready to get to that.
Right.
I do want to answer that question. I'm just kind of looking at my notes here because I got a little bit of an
That's
agenda.
fine. Yeah.
I think I think we've done enough. Well, no, I wanted to get a little more. I'm going to write down how to stop the cycle. I was talking with the avoidance, but I'm going to write down how to stop the cycle because there are answers for that question. I just wanted to get a little more from the avoidance. What do you wish the other people would know about you? Is there anybody willing to speak that? And Arthur, you're
Yeah,
willing to speak about that. Okay.
yeah. I don't know that I would classify myself as avoidant, but just
Mhm.
with a little bit of context. So in my
Yeah.
previous relationship, I was highly anxious preoccupied, and my partner was extremely fearful avoidant. So it's like even one of the worst of the avoidant
Yeah.
variants. But I think in response to that, like I had to do a lot of learning and a lot of healing. I'm now in a relationship with someone else who is also has anxious preoccupied tendencies, and what I find is that sometimes our dynamic leads to triggering some avoidant tendencies in me,
Mhm.
and I make sure to not avoid, because like I definitely don't want to do to him what I had done to me. Um, so it's not a thing that I'm not actually acting on any kind of avoidant tendencies that come up. But what I find myself wanting in a lot of the dynamics is like knowing that he can manage and self-soothe and like handle issues on his own, that like it does not necessarily require my participation. Like I am happy to like come and give that comfort and help co-regulate and whatever, but it lands not super well with me when it seems like he is completely and utterly dependent on me, and he may not be. right?
Yeah.
But if it lands with me that way,
Yeah.
then that can be a little unpleasant. And so I guess to the extent that I'm channeling any kind of avoidant
Mm-hmm.
tendencies, I guess what I'm wanting is like, hey, yes, we might have landed into some amount of friction on some topic or whatever, but like it's going to be fine. We're going to work through this. This is not the end of the world. Like, yes, let's talk about it, but we don't need to blow it up into like a big thing because it's not necessarily a big thing. Like, yes, totally, let's talk about it, but like,
Okay,
let's,
I'm
yeah,
gonna use what you're saying to actually talk a little bit about how to stop the cycle. Can I I want to
sure.
go there now, Arthur, because I, I think that's a great example. Um, you would be able, here's one answer to observers' question. You would be able, perhaps, so this is advice now, to say, I know we'll get through this. That's a tip for you, Arthur. I know we'll get through this. Some people can be, when you're wishing the other person would self-regulate. And that's the other piece of the thing I got from listening to Arthur is I want you to take some responsibility to learn to regulate yourself. So this is another piece of the answer to how do we stop the cycle. First, we have to recognize the cycle we're in. Like the more I do this, the more you seem to do that. Like for some people, the more I ask you questions, like suspicious questions, the more you seem to hide. And the more you ask me, questions, the more I feel like hiding. You see, that's some couples' vicious cycle right there, asking questions and hiding. Um, there's lots of those. The more I am free, let me think about this. The more I want to take breaks. Well, actually, that's not a good example. I think I'll just stick with the one example because I think you can see the general idea. It's like the more you do your thing, the more you talk, the more silent your partner becomes. And well, if you wouldn't talk so much, I wouldn't be so silent. See, it's if only you would do this, then I could be the way you want me to. So many couples exhibit this kind of a vicious cycle, and so first you have to like, what is our vicious cycle? Or maybe there's two or three. No, the more advice you give me, the more defensive I get. Well, if you wouldn't give me so much advice, I wouldn't be making excuses and defending. But geez, you're so defensive, you don't ever own your mistakes. I gotta give you advice, man. I can't trust you. So so observer, that's the main thing is admit that there is a vicious cycle and admit that there's triggering in the space, which means dysregulation of your nervous system because all of a sudden things don't feel safe to you. And it's whatever type you are, you feel unsafe. And when an avoidant person feels unsafe, they do tend to kind of withdraw into themselves. Usually the main reason is because the avoidant actually, their nervous system can't tolerate as much excitation because they're not used to it as the more preoccupied person. The preoccupied person just has a harder time calming themselves, and they really do need a little bit of reassurance or input from the avoidant. I know you might hate these terms, but we got to call it something. Or I imagine some of you hate these terms. I don't know. Probably most of us are kind of familiar with them. Um, so we all need to admit that we get triggered sometimes, that our nervous system gets dysregulated because one of our core fears has has come up. Let me just quickly show you a screen share that kind of gives you an idea of some of the fear stories, the way the fears play in your head. So I'm going to do a screen share. So the words "I'm being ignored or criticized," I mean, I'm being judged or criticized, or I'm being ignored or not included. It might not be exactly that way it plays in your head, because the first way it's probably going to play in your head is going to have a blaming flavor to it. Like, why do they keep criticizing me? Why are they always on my back? But underneath that blaming kind of reactive story, because I call, reactive stories are the song that plays in your head when you're triggered. So whenever you think anything like that, or anything that's blaming the other person for having you feel like that, you're triggered. And the first bunch there are, well, actually, I missed, I should have changed one of these, because I'm being judged or criticized should go down in the second bunch. But I'm not a priority. I'm all alone. I'm not seen. There's no space for my needs. Those are the kind of reactive stories that play in the preoccupied mind. And the second category, I'm trapped, smothered, invaded. I'm being blamed. I'm a disappointment. That's a big one for avoidant types, is either I'm being seen as bad or wrong, or I'm a disappointment. And I'm going through these as kind of like technical terms almost. I mean, I'm just saying them very technically, but there's feeling here. And when that story plays in your head, there's a tender fear underneath that you're not valued, you're not being heard, that sort of thing. So it's important to be familiar. Back to how do we stop the cycle? We have to be humble enough to admit that we're triggered sometimes, and to know the early warning signs, like I hear that story playing in my head, or I have any kind of blaming story. If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have done that. All of that, whether it's in your mind or verbally. So we learn to recognize the cycle and recognize the symptoms of being triggered. Then we need to go to how to self-regulate. How do I calm my nervous system? And for many of us, it has to do with some kind of sensory awareness, tuning into the body sensations. In fact, let's just try that right now. Your body sensations, how the chair is holding you. Maybe your feet are on the floor. Notice your breath. It's this kind of thing that we need to get good at. And it's very hard to do when your nervous system is like there's a 4-alarm fire in there. And many people don't really know the brain science of being triggered. So I'll just mention that super briefly. We have a part of our brain in the amygdala that brain scientists call the survival alarm system. And it's in there always scanning for, am I safe? Is there danger? It came from primitive times when survival depended on reacting very quickly to any sign of danger, like the bushes are rustling. Let's say you're back in the Stone Age, and the bushes are rustling, and you think, well, that could be a saber-toothed tiger. I better, get out my spear, or I better run like hell. So we still have that part of the brain, and that takes precedence over the neocortex, which is the part of the brain that is a little slower to react, which would say, are you sure that that's a saber-toothed tiger? That's not a. Are you sure that's a saber-toothed tiger? Well, if I took time to ask that question, I might be lunch for somebody. So we've got that quickly reacting thing that overpowers the neocortex in any given moment. And so really our higher brain is not online. We can't really make good sense of the situation. So we go into our automatic reaction that we've learned unconsciously, and most of us aren't really even conscious how many of our reactions are automatic. If you want to learn more about that, uh, my book, 5 Minute Relationship Repair, talks about how these different attachment styles play out together in typical scenarios, and a lot about how to recognize your reactive cycle, calm yourself. When you feel into the fear that's been stimulated, you bring self-compassion to that fear. I'm making it all sound easy here, but it's really all laid out in the book. And then the final step is the repair. So there is a type of psychological work that I call trigger work, or some people just call it inner work, that people who have the growth mindset and want to use your relationship for growth, you learn these practices and you practice them for the rest of your life with whoever you're with. Any questions before we go on? Scott?
What you just said triggered me, which is specifically like what you said, the difference between growth set and fixed mindset. Realizing like sometime and when in this, dance, this vicious cycle that I feel, I'm telling myself I'm in a growth mindset and they're in a fixed mindset.
Uh-huh.
Um, which I'm guessing may or may not be true. It's just part of that is how the other side looks to me.
Good point. Good point. And there are people who just aren't interested in this stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And
Like,
some
how do you tell the difference? That's
um
kind of what I'm asking.
grow. You you
What?
you grow. You grow your
Yeah,
own ability to see beyond your own triggered filter.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know
It
when,
always goes back to me, right?
and the way you know when you're triggered and when you're not is you kind of pause and go, do I feel safe? I mean, that's one of the easiest ways because we kind of know I don't feel safe, or what's going on in my nervous system. It's chaos in there, or it's agitated, or it's so shut down, and you kind of get to know your tendencies. Some of us never seem to be triggered. It's always the other person who's triggered, and I'm the calm one. Well, there's great value in being in that kind of relationship if you think you're the calm one, because if you stay in that relationship long enough, you will be driven to feel some emotions that you've never felt before and didn't know were down there. Oh, helplessness, anger, intense frustration, and you begin to feel the pain of the helplessness of not being able to get through to this person. And anytime there's emotional pain and people are of these two different types are going to frustrate each other, or what Scott mentioned, people who seem to be oblivious to the value of self-awareness and self-knowledge, just, don't bug me with that stuff. It's airy fairy or whatever. And the people who really are committed to a constant self-awareness and learning about yourself. So that, whatever the polarity is, you're going to get enough frustrated so it puts you in touch with some emotional pain inside of you that you really need to feel. That's why opposites attract. So I'll come back to this. I have a bunch of programs. I used, one of them was on Psychology Today audio, but it was called Why Opposites Attract and Later Repel, because romance stage is one thing you're attracting, but power struggle stage, your shadow material is coming up, provoked by the differences. So power struggle really means just confronting differences, and that's kind of a normal developmental task in the couple's journey. If you're interested in couple stages, I have this book. It's now only on Kindle called The Couple's Journey, about the 5 stages that relationships go through. But I'm not going to get into that. But it is all about why opposites attract and how once you connect with your own pain and frustration about the difference, you get to feel parts of yourself. You're almost like forced to feel parts of yourself that, you've been able to avoid all your life. So this is just a sales pitch for doing the inner work with somebody else. And you really can, like back to these two types, you really, once you've learned, oh, this is pain in me that I have to keep feeling until I've really owned some of the things that happened to me in childhood that were very painful. We a full and developed life has to, at some point, come to terms with the hand you were dealt. Some of you have read my Substack articles on coming to terms with the hand you were dealt and then how you played that hand. And those are like 2 major things that people kind of do in life. And the sooner you can do that, the better. I'm writing about it being a task of the final stage of life, like people my age. But the sooner you can go, whoa, I was missing that. And what a good kid I was. And how how loving and open-hearted I was until this or that happened. And now I'm kind of protected or suspicious and really grieving the hand you were dealt sometimes, or parts of the hand you were dealt. There's beneficial parts and there's unfortunate parts. So just about every client that I have that where we really keep doing the work, it ends with grief. So I want to, and I mean, this is what the work is like. But you can learn. Let's say you're preoccupied, and you get that your partner's overwhelmed by too many words or too many questions. And many clients that I've worked with who I would have thought would have made it through. Like I'm thinking of one woman, and her partner liked to do a lot of travel because his hobby was photography, and she learned that he really needs a lot of space based on what was going on in his childhood, but he loves her very much. He loves to come back to her, and she found ways to reassure herself and manage her insecurities just by talking enough about what it meant to him to be able to travel, and him not overreacting to her pursuits, her complaints about him not being there all the time. And you have to make this an intention. So this is back to how do you stop the cycle again? We have to make it an intention to stop scaring our partner, because the constant complaints and questions from her to him, they were scaring him into thinking, I can't even be in a relationship. I'm no good at relationships. And he was constantly breaking up with her for a long time. But she hung in there and she managed her insecurities in such a beautiful way that I see them on the street and they're the happiest couple I know, practically. They're older, but they're kind of like young lovers or something. So we only have a little bit longer, like 1 minute. Any comments or questions? All right. Okay, Scott.
Like if no one else is going to speak up, I
You can
will.
always depend on Scott.
I'm curious. I feel like I'm, one of the disorganized. I go back and forth. At least I
Yeah.
feel like I am. And the other thing is, I definitely feel like I don't do this with just my significant others. I do it with my family. I do it with my siblings. I think it's how I see the world is, it feels like it's much bigger than just with my significant other. And
Good.
is that
It
normal?
does. Yes, that's normal. All this stuff works across the board, uh, depending on um, how how your nervous system is wired, really. Some people
Yeah.
only get upset in this way by a significant other or maybe their child, the real obligatory relationships in life that are hard to get away from. Those are the ones where the stakes are higher and you're going to get triggered more often because uh, the a difference well, differences usually are kind of triggering at first until people understand what the differences are about. So the there's going to be some difference that tends to threaten the security of the relationship and the longevity of it. So if it's a high stakes relationship, like a marriage and you got kids and a family and a house, that's going to trigger some people more. So it does usually have to do with what the stakes are to you. You'll get more triggered. But yeah, you totally get triggered with your boss or your friends the same way, and even go into the preoccupied avoidant vicious cycle. Uh, I've mediated many like friendships or family members, adult family members. A lot of those the the motivation to really succeed at healing and mending the difference, the motivation is not as strong as with like a married couple with kids in a house. So that's a generalization, but uh, I'm a lot more successful with people who have more at stake because, they're motivated to do the hard work. And Arthur, we'll have your question and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe echo what Scott shared, about its manifesting in other parts of life. When I was a lot more anxious preoccupied, one of the areas in my life that it really manifested and I didn't even realize was in work, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like because work is high stakes, my livelihood depends on it, right? And it was like, if I found myself in a difficult situation or like in conflict or whatever, like I kept thinking to myself, if I can just do the right thing, if I can just say the right thing, I can fix this situation, even if the situation around me was like completely toxic and untenable and it was a bad situation. Like that typical anxious preoccupied mindset is I can make a bad situation work. And if I can make this situation work, like, then I'll know that I'm successful, like whatever, right? Like way too much to go into and unpack there, but like, it was, it's a fine line between like appropriate grit and tenacity on the one hand and, beating your head against a wall to make a bad situation work. But that's all just to say, like, in retrospect, it was so obvious to me how it was like my own AP tendencies that were just manifesting real hard in some unpleasant work situations.
Yeah. And there's a phrase, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to quit. And that's an individual decision for all of us. Some people, it's just, first trigger in the relationship. That's just going to be too much work for me. Or at a deeper level, I kind of know that I can't handle that. My nervous system really cannot handle that much stress and agitation. And you have a right at any point to make that decision. Hopefully, if it's any kind of a significant relationship, you don't make it unilaterally, but you talk to each other with honesty and heart about why. But some people really can't handle very much trigger reactivity in a relationship, and that's your privilege to make that decision. My first rule is always you got to take care of your health. Okay. So thanks so much for your good attention here. And I don't know what topic I'm going to do next month, but I hope you'll be interested in it or curious enough to come and see what happens. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you.